Hello, hello, and hi, and welcome to another edition of Things We Said Today, a bi-weekly Beatles podcast where we talk all the time about the Beatles, the group years, the solo years, what's going on in the news, anything that comes to mind. I'm Ken Michaels. I'm one of the four regular co-hosts of the show. Hopefully you're aware of my syndicated Beatles radio program called Every Little Thing, as well as another podcast show, which still is in existence, called Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles video cast that is exclusively on the solo careers of the Beatles. And I have my own YouTube channel, Ken Michaels Radio, which is loaded with Beatles content, interviews with other podcasters, authors, musicians, you name it. And I'm being joined by my regulars here. There's Allan Kozinn. Allan is the co-author of the now famous McCartney Legacy series, volumes 1 and 2 with Adrian Sinclair. Also is the author of From the Cavern to the Rooftop and Got That Something, How the Beatles I Want to Hold Your Hand Changed Everything. He's also been a frequent contributor to Beatle Fan since the 1980s. Hi, Allan.
Hey Ken, hello Darren, Kit, everyone out there.
Mm-hmm. And we also have Darren DeVivo, who, as I've said many times, has been a fixture in New York radio for, was it 44, 45 years, about the same
No,
time.
I'm not that old. Almost.
All
42,
right.
40, 42.
Okay. You could exaggerate a little bit. No one's going to know.
Just round up.
Well, when I was younger, I would exaggerate. Now I'm trying to make it go the other way, in the other direction.
You could also hear Darren Friday nights on WKZE with noises from the valley from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., which you can stream. He's going to tell you more all about that. Darren, hello, hello.
Hello, everyone. Great to be on board. Looking forward to tonight's show with our special guests.
Okay. And when she's not hobnobbing with Taylor and Kelsey, you can find Kit O'Toole.
In
I
fact,
don't like come up with these things.
wasn't Kit with the with Taylor and the Haim sisters at the Knicks game?
Yes,
You
yes,
bet.
you spotted her.
I have the T-shirt. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I thought I.
Actually, she had her arm around Timothy Chalamet throughout
That's
most
right.
of it. I don't know if you saw that too. She gets around.
That's right.
Anyway, but Kit O'Toole is known for so many things. The author of Songs We Were Singing, Guided Tours to the Beatles' lesser known tracks. They shouldn't be lesser known. Also, Michael Jackson FAQ, All That's Left to Know About the King of Pop. She also is the co-host of another Beatles podcast called Toppermost of the Poppermost. Gotta get them on my channel.
We
They're
will, I
coming,
swear.
I promise you.
Mhm.
And also works with Ken Womack for a lot of presentations online on your computer with all kinds of things involving music. And she's always busy. It's a wonder she has time for us. Kid O'Toole, hello.
Well, I always have time for you guys. And hi, everybody.
Okay, we're going to have hopefully a couple of special guests here for the show, which is all tied together concerning Wings and all the Wings activities of the last half a year or so. So much to talk about, and we'll get to that in just a few moments. We do have lots of Beatle news to get to here, but there's so much that, kind of like the last show, I'm going to reserve some of it from my own YouTube channel. So when you can, when you're done with this show, scoot on over to Ken Michaels Radio and you'll get the rest of it. Okay, first of all, as I'm sure many of you know, Paul McCartney is about to celebrate his 84th birthday. That's this Thursday, June the 18th. So what can we say? A lifetime's worth of great music. Thank you so much, Paul. Have the best birthday ever. Also, Paul has quite a lot to celebrate at the moment. His new album, The Boys of Dungeon Lane, debuted at #1 on the official album charts in the UK, becoming his 24th #1 album in the UK, and that includes The Beatles, Wings, and Solo. But the following week dropped to number 18 While here in the US, it debuted at number 5 on Billboard's Top 200 album charts for the week of June 13th, and for that same week included a number 1 arrival on top album sales, vinyl albums, and indie store album sales. The set also launched at number 2 on top rock albums, number 2 on top rock and alternative albums, and we're waiting to see where it will be coming later on this week in Billboard. The record also hit number 1 on the worldwide iTunes album chart and topped the iTunes album chart in over 15 countries, including the United Kingdom, which we know about, Canada, Australia, and Mexico. It also peaked at number 2 on the US iTunes chart. According to Apple Music, it reached the top 10 on the European Apple Music chart and charted on the worldwide Apple Music tally. You're going to be quizzed on all this. You must remember all those stats. Even I can't remember all that. For those of you who collect the variants for Paul's album, more for the music and the extra audio rather than the different colored vinyl, iTunes released the album digitally with 1 bonus track, and that's the demo for the song First Star of the Night. The newest variation is a digital album featuring 7 bonus tracks of personal commentary from Paul, sharing the stories behind several songs on the album alongside studio moments, creative inspirations, Liverpool memories, and reflections on the people and places behind the music. It's exclusive to the official McCartney store. Paul was at London's Roundhouse last Wednesday. What are you lifting up there?
It's just some of them.
Oh, okay. It looked like the Bible there for a second.
And then I got the others are right
All
here.
right.
Oh, God.
And you wonder why I'm going to end up living in my garage at some point.
Be living in a tent.
Still have to get the cassette. Anyway, sorry.
So Paul was at the Roundhouse last Wednesday to spend 2 hours with his fans discussing every song on his new album, The Boys of Dungeon Lane, with British comedian and impressionist Rob Brydon. Now, Ringo Starr wrapped up his all-star band tour with his last show at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles. That was last night. We're recording this on the 15th. So it was June 14th this happened. The changes in his set list on this 2-week tour included Choose Love. That's the new arrangement of the song on his latest album, Long, Long Road. Now, his last tour before this one, he was opening his show with the Carl Perkins song, Honey Don't. On this tour, he went back to opening with Carl's Matchbox instead. Ringo has been a longtime supporter of WaterAid, and he has collaborated with them on an exclusive limited edition collection. The one message at its heart is change starts with water. Available for 8 weeks only, you can purchase t-shirts and tote bags, and every purchase directly supports WaterAid's work to reach everyone, everywhere, with clean water, decent toilets, and good hygiene. All right. 2 very special events will be happening. Speaking of Ringo, his 86th birthday will be coming up on July 7th, and he has been doing for many years now, holding his annual Peace and Love Day, where at noontime, wherever you are in the world, he asks you to say or think peace and love. There's always a celebration with Ringo doing the countdown and videos from all over the world of people saying and shouting peace and love. And usually where he does this in Los Angeles, there are bands playing, sometimes some superstar acts too, doing Ringo songs, which you can stream online. And June 25th, to celebrate the anniversary of the worldwide performance of All You Need Is Love on the Our World broadcast, the Beatles and Apple Corps have recognized June 25th as Global Beatles Day, and a colorized video of their performance of All You Need Is Love will be shown on YouTube for the first time. Fans all over the globe will be invited to take part in Global Beatles Day. Our colleague Steve Marinucci just did a video interview with Beatles fan Faith Cohen, who led the initiative to do this. If you would like to be a part of Global Beatles Day, there's a link that you can click on for more information. It's going to be right there in our description box. Just a few more things to talk about. A new Beatles project coming this year is the Beatles film A Hard Day's Night being mixed for Dolby Atmos. It's being done by famed engineer Gary Bourgeois. He says it is the whole film redone for Atmos distribution, and yes, not easy, as the original was shot in 16 millimeter black and white and all mono. He added this will be for both home and also theatrical Dolby Atmos formatting. So that's something to look forward to, I guess, in the fall here. I hope that doesn't take the place of anything else, like a Rubber Soul box set or something like that, but at least we know that's coming.
How about a Hard Day's Night box set with the Atmos mix on, DVD or Blu-ray?
There you go.
Hey, listen to us, Apple. Finally, the documentary about Peter Asher, Everywhere Man, opens in U.S. theaters this Friday, June 19th, starting with an exclusive release in New York City before expanding to Los Angeles and nationwide theaters on June the 26th. Following its theatrical run, the documentary will be released on digital platforms. For updates on local cinema showtimes as they become available, check Fandango showtimes or the AMC Theaters listing page. Once the film rolls out on digital streaming and video on demand services, you can find it via platforms like, how do you pronounce this? It's MUBI, Mubi? Peter
Movie.
Asher. Did you know? I
I
guess
think it's
not.
movie. I'm pretty sure.
Mubi. Okay. Peter will be celebrating his 81st birthday on June 22nd. And that's all the news we have for you this time. So,
Hey.
as Alan works his magic with that little swirly thing, we may have some special guests here to present to you. They're coming out of the swirl. And we're very pleased to say that we have a surprise for you. We have, at the moment, one guest, hopefully two. From the last lineup of Wings, Laurence Juber is here, the lead guitarist in the group. He was on the Back to the Egg album, the single for Good Night Tonight. He was part of the 1979 UK tour. And we're hoping that Steve Holley will join us as well, of course, being the drummer during that time. We thought that we would invite Laurence and Steve on because so much has been going on Wings-wise in the news. And we thought we'd talk about, first of all, the new Paul McCartney and Wings exhibit at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which Laurence and Steve both attended, and also their thoughts on the Man on the Run documentary that came out recently. Maybe they might want to give us their take on Paul's new album, and also tell us, what they're doing today and talk about their time with Paul. Maybe back to the egg questions, whatever. But Laurence is with us, so great to have you back, Laurence, as always.
Well, thank you. This is the sound of one wing flapping.
Very good. He's always ready for some witty remark.
It's being married to a comedy writer makes a big difference.
We should also mention by way of introduction, since we're introducing Lawrence's, with his Wings background and all that, that since then there are all of those solo albums he's made, which are absolutely spectacular. And if you haven't investigated them, it's never too late to start.
Never too late.
I think
Lawrence
Lawrence
has a new
says
album.
if you count compilations and whatnot, Lawrence, I mean you've cleared 30 albums at least.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and not just, there's my solo albums,
Right.
but there's also the 4 albums that I produced and played on with Al Stewart.
Right. Yeah, of course.
And then just in the last couple of years, there was Richard T. Bear's Way of the World album that I co-produced. and played all the and arranged. There's also one that came out last year with a singer named Christina Rich. We did an album called Jimmy's, which is all songs from Jimmy McHugh's catalog, and Tom Scott played on it, and I arranged it and produced it. So I've been very active, and that is completely separate from all the hundreds of TV shows and movies that I played on as a studio musician over the years. But my focus has obviously been on being a solo guitar player, because that gave me a lot of flexibility. And it also, by virtue of the fact that I would sit in the living room and start playing, and Hope wanted me to play Beatles songs, and I'd start playing Beatles songs, and then she said, you should do an album of Beatles songs. And I said, no, I'm a composer. And she said, you should do an album of Beatles songs. And she won the argument, and I said, okay, well, you can produce. So the latest one, I've Got a Feeling, which just came out a couple of weeks ago, is the fifth in the series of new arrangements. But I also did an album at Abbey Road in Studio 2 called A Day in My Life that was re-records of some of my favorite arrangements too. So there's actually, just on the Beatle component, there's 6 albums.
Wow.
But that doesn't even, it's not even a third of the available songs. I mean, the repertoire is vast. But I do have to get back to doing my own stuff too. So,
Laurence, have you ever considered, not to start talking about what you might do down the line, but most of the albums that you've done under your own name have been acoustic-based albums. Have you ever thought about doing a straight, maybe rock record or an electric guitar record, or one even with lyrics and vocals?
Well, I mean, I don't sing very much, but it's funny because yesterday I was on Breakfast with the Beatles with Chris Carter here in LA. And in one of the breaks, I sang 20 Flight Rock, illustrating the fact that while we were at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for the Wings exhibit opening, I got to play Eddie Cochran's guitar.
Hmm.
Wow.
And I got to play 20 Flight Rock on Eddie Cochran's guitar.
Wow.
And so, and I have my band Airfoil with, Jeff Allen Ross, who was, Peter Ash's right-hand man and is now running Lovin' Spoonful. I have him in Airfoil. I have, a group of great musicians who are also singers. So we all sing, and I do some of the songs that work in my register. I mean, like Getting Closer, for example, Spin It On. And, that's the rockier side of Wings. There's no silly love songs in that repertoire. But I played electric. I mean, I just came from Tony Braunagle's studio playing electric guitar on T-Bear's album. I mean, I do it with other people. I just have not really been that motivated to do it myself as a primary focus. I mean, and some of that is simply, if I make an electric guitar instrumental album, that means I have to put the band together to go out and play it. And I have enough trouble just getting on an airplane these days. It's not fun like it used to be. And, so some of it is just purely logistic. But I love getting together with other musicians and playing. I mean, most of my local LA area gigs are on electric guitar, not on acoustic guitar. And even on the new album, on I've Got a Feeling, 10 of the 14 tracks were done on an electric arch top. I mean, one of these.
All right.
Just really for a change of texture and a sonic difference that gives me more room to improvise. Because as much as I'm, an arranger of Beatles songs, the improv side of things is always just below the surface. So I get to satisfy a few different inclinations at the same time. This way.
Gotcha.
But yeah, but Cleveland, I mean, the Wings exhibit at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is fantastic. They did an incredible job curating it. I have my Gibson SG and my Mesa Boogie amplifier that I used on the 79 tour are in there, along with the Japanese tour jacket from the infamous Japanese tour and a white scarf that says Rockestra 79, that everybody who played in the Rockestra component of the Kampuchea concert that we did got one of these scarves too. So
Wow.
that's my little contribution. And there are a few pictures of me in there that I'd never seen before too. But but of course, Wings as a project, spans a much greater period of time than I was in the band. But Denny Sywell contributed stuff, and Liz, Denny Lane's widow, contributed guitars and things like that. I mean, it's and MPL were very, very involved in it. So
Nice.
they weren't cutting any corners with this. They really, the whole sixth floor of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is dedicated to it. It's going to run for at least a year, probably longer, and may go on to different locations afterwards. So if you can't get to Cleveland, maybe it'll come to a museum near you. You never know.
Huh. I was going to ask you if it took up an entire floor. Is every member of Wings, did every member contribute something, including Britain or?
I mean, there are elements that were contributed by associates of the deceased Wings members. I mean, remember,
Yes.
Of the non-McCartney named guitar players in Wings, I'm the only surviving one. I mean, Henry, Jimmy, and Denny are all gone, and there were things that were contributed by people associated with the other musicians. I don't know about Joe English. I don't think that I caught anything that Joe had contributed, but and Steve Holly's got his the syndromes that he used on Coming Up, on the live Coming Up, are in there, along with the flexitone that he used on the opening of Arrow Through Me. That kind of boing sound is a flexitone. Yeah. So they really did a great job, and we had a lovely time because the VIP component of the opening, Steve and I played with some of the guys from the Hall of Fame. We played for like 20 minutes. We're open tonight, getting closer. I know we did 20 Flight Rock and Rockestra. I think that's what we did. Yeah. And I forget what I played solo, but I played something solo too.
Wow.
Wow.
I heard that the lyrics, the handwritten lyrics for the songs from Venus and Mars were on display there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Really, and they kind of reproduced the kitchen from the farm. And
Nice.
there's some great interactive stuff where you can kind of pick an album and then kind of on a touch screen you can get a lot of information. People seem to really be enjoying it. So
Wow.
Wow. What rock and roll musicians, I mean, Hall of Fame musicians did you jam with?
well, no, these were the guys who actually worked there, who curated the exhibit. But
Okay.
they're all musicians, so it was one of them was a keyboard player, another was an actual guitarist, but was playing bass. So
Okay. You guys have any questions about the Hall of Fame you want to ask Laurence?
I'm so happy to see that Wings, is getting this recognition.
Mhm.
We've had this debate on this show on with amongst ourselves and with other guests about Wings being a true band. Should Wings be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I believe they should be. And now yet here is not just like a corner exhibit or just a small showcase of a few token items. You're seeing an entire floor has now been dedicated to a band that, let's face it, was one of the biggest selling acts of the 70s. It really has to feel for you, Laurence, very gratifying.
Mhm.
That, I mean, maybe a little frustrating it took this long, but gratifying that that something's moving positively.
Well,
There's nothing that annoys me more like when I listen to the radio and they play coming up, or they play Band on the Run, or they play Silly Love Songs, and the DJ, and I could say this as being one, has the audacity to say, that was Paul McCartney and Silly Love Songs. No, it wasn't, you knucklehead. It was Wings.
Well, here's my thoughts on it. Wings was a project. It was a project where Paul wanted to be in a band with Linda, and bringing in his associates, especially Denny Laine. But within the project, you had these various incarnations of the band. And certainly when Steve and I were, joined Wings, we were really encouraged to think of it as a band, not just being Paul's sidemen. And Linda, too, also was very encouraging in that regard. As far as the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame goes, there's a lot of politics involved in who gets inducted. My theory is that because they have this musical excellence category, where you have Carol Kay, for example, Nicky Hopkins, musicians that are contributory musicians, that Wings as a collective group of musicians would fit very neatly into that category, because being Paul McCartney's musical associates in that particular period of time was a big contribution to the arc of his career, and the transition from the Beatles into pure solo McCartney, and the fact that he was inducted as a Beatle and also as a solo artist. But you have Denny Laine, who's only in there as a Moody Blue, and then you have Linda, who's not in there at all, and should be, because she was integral to Wings. And, not just in terms of a keyboard player, but also as a singer. Maligned as a singer, but you turn on the radio and you hear Silly Love Songs, and that vocal sound of Paul, Linda, and Denny is as characteristic of that era as the Beach Boys or the Carpenters. I meant the Bee Gees, although the Beach Boys too, but the Bee Gees in particular, that kind of harmony vocal sound that was very much part of that era. I think that the Wings could be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame under those circumstances. And this exhibit may have opened the door to that. Yeah, fingers crossed. And as far as I'm concerned, the gratification of actually having this exhibit and the recognition of Wings as a totality, it's certainly a very special experience, and I'm glad that we had the opportunity to go out and be there for it and to celebrate it, because in reality that Steve and I, other than Paul, are the active musical entities from that era, still active musical entities. So it was very special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Could you shed some light on the relationship, both personal, maybe more importantly, professional musical relationship between Paul and Denny Laine, and Denny being the guy who stood the whole course of the band. In fact, it was Denny's announcement that he was leaving in '81 that was really the final nail.
Yeah.
What was that chemistry?
April 27th, 1981.
Right.
Was the day that Wings officially folded. I met Hope April 28th, 1980.
Nice.
It was literally kind of the door closed. But I'd already moved to New York because the writing was very clearly on the wall anyway. Mm-hmm. Denny was, Paul wanted to have a sidekick, as it were. Somebody who was an authentic, which Denny undoubtedly was an authentic, rock and roller, with this great kind of cross current of his kind of gypsy folky qualities with his R&B soul qualities too. Hang on, let me get rid of this thing. There we go. I think that relationship was a very important relationship. I mean, you look at, as a writing team, they didn't write a great deal of music together, but what they did write together was, I mean, and, Mull of Kintyre, for example, was, one of the biggest hits of all time in Europe. I mean, it sold 2 million copies in the space of a week and a half in Germany. I mean, it was very successful as a songwriting team. And what Paul contributed to Denny's writing, as far as, Denny having fragments of songs and Paul being very good at combining fragments of songs. I mean, it's a specialty of his. Is, when you take No Words was two different songs that were put together. Again and Again and Again were 2 different songs that were put together. Paul was very, very perspicacious when it came to Denny's strengths as a songwriter. And just having him there at that vocal quality, which was a great blend with Paul and Linda, having his guitar playing skills, great rhythm guitar player, great, utility bass player, keyboard player. I mean, he had all the talents to be a valued member of the core band. And although, Denny wasn't in the very first kind of glimmer of Wings, because Denny Sywell was really kind of preceded Denny Laine when it came to the excuse me, when it came to Wings coming together. But of course, that Denny Laine got brought in very quickly.
Denny Laine told me that Paul was always encouraging him to write for the band.
Yeah.
And certainly by the time of London Town, there's 5 songs on the album
Right.
that they wrote together, plus the single with Mull of Kintyre on there.
Yeah, I
But
mean, Denny was just great, and he was, of course, Denny was the person that got me into Wings,
Right.
because I had worked with him on a David Essex TV show when he did Go Now, and he liked my playing, and he recommended me. But I mean, that was like 6 months from the time that we first worked together till the time I actually went and auditioned for the band. But and I think that Denny was kind of the talent scout at that point for Paul and Linda, and I know that what really piqued his interest in what I could do was the fact that I was versatile. Because I mean, my predecessors, Henry and Jimmy, were great rock guitar players, but there was stuff that they just didn't do. And I think when we in the Back to the Egg album, you've got stuff that really ranges from this kind of punk rockabilly to the more mainstream rock stuff, but then the jazzy stuff like Baby's Request, for example. I mean, and the folky stuff too. I mean, it covered, I could cover a lot of different musical areas, which is, I think, and at the end of the day, I think I fit the suit.
You talk about
Brady Bunch reference.
You talk about when you were offered the opportunity to join Wings, you had to very quickly learn the catalog because you weren't quite up on.
Oh, but I didn't learn the catalog. That was the thing, was that I borrowed the LPs from my brother, but I had a weekend and it was like, where do I start with this? So, and as it turned out, I mean, the audition was, we played some Chuck Berry songs and some reggae grooves. So, and Paul, at that point, there was an album that needed to be made, and Steve and I, and Chris Thomas was there when we did the audition, and Chris had been brought in to co-produce what became the Back to the Egg album, and it all gelled at that point.
You just said something that I've been thinking about this conversation, how diverse the music of Wings was. I mean, you go from Mull of Kintyre to Spin It On to the reggae, and I was wondering, does the exhibit at the Hall of Fame address this broad range of styles that encompass Wings?
I think that, I mean, reading between the items, you kind of get a sense of it, you know. But in reality, I mean, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is not specifically about the music itself. It's about the culture that surrounds the music and the instruments and the stageware and the environment that the music gets made in. Music itself, it's not a conservatory
Right.
kind of thing. I mean, it really has more to do with everything else that is adjacent and surrounds the music.
Yeah,
And
because I just think that's
hadn't been there in about 15 years, and it's really grown in that period of time. I mean, it's really a remarkable place at this point.
It really is. It really is. But I mean, I just think that's one of the many fascinating things about Wings, you know, that sort of, and the musicians that played that, even though you mentioned, you know, some of them could do, past members could do some styles better than others and so forth. Still, it seems like, and you fit that perfectly, as you mentioned, excuse me, that you had to know about a broad range of styles, because that's kind of what Wings was about.
Well, but so were the Beatles. I mean, the reality is that I don't know that there's ever been another band that could encompass the range of the Beatles. And Paul, you know, in Wings was really just continuing that broad versatility that was always in his artistic self. You know, going back to, you know, having a dad who had a jazz band. And I love the fact that when they did, they had him on, what was it, Colbert, you know, when they did the final show. And then I saw a video afterwards where they were jamming on When the Saints Go Marching In, and Paul's playing trumpet. Because that was his first instrument. You know, if your dad has a jazz, you know, kind of a trad jazz band, then, you know, trumpet makes sense.
During the pandemic, there was a thing that he did with the I think Preservation Hall band, where he also played trumpet on When the Saints Go Marching In.
I can't imagine that he has that much of a lip, you know, because that's, if you don't do it all the time, it's you know, hard to make a sound. But you mentioned, I mean, When the Saints Go Marching In, and a little Beatlology, musicology, that the chord progression that song is based on goes back to the Renaissance. And if you break down I Saw Her Standing There, it's basically the chord progression of When the Saints Go Marching In with a Chuck Berry bass line. And the continuity, and this is, you know, one thing that people don't necessarily recognize, is that there is very little that's new in modern music. That the chord progressions, and it goes through even in the classical sphere, that unless you know what, you know, where the origins of these kinds of kind of musical elements are, you don't always get the reference. You know, there's a progression called a Baroque progression called the Folia, that and in modern music, there was a song called The Green Leaves of Summer that is based on that progression. But Beethoven uses it in the second movement of the Fifth Symphony. And unless you have a reference, you'd never know that that's what that was. But in his era, people would know what it was. You know, so there's stuff that, you know, we kind of take for granted. And I just find it interesting because that's kind of, When the Saints Go Marching In was the go-to. When one of the gigs, I forget whether it was Newcastle, where it was, but the power went out during the gig, and the horn section started playing When the Saints Go Marching In, and we're strumming on acoustic guitars and keeping the show going until the power went back on again.
Wow. Can you give some examples? I know in all the years that I've spoken with you, you've told me about the relationship of Paul with the band, is that there are times when he has very definite ideas of what he wants, and then there are times when he just takes ideas and allows the other musicians to contribute. So give us an idea of, well, I mean, for example, you mentioned Baby's Request and you coming up with the intro for that, of at that time on Back to the Egg, when the other members of Wings contributed something that was their idea, maybe, that you can remember?
Oh yeah,
Or
I
you were,
mean, there was um, there was a lot of freedom to contribute stuff. I mean, there was part of the chord progression of the instrumental breaks in Old Siamsa was we were jamming before we ever started recording the album. We were jamming, and Steve Holley was playing piano, electric piano, and played that progression, which then evolved into
mm,
into what became that section in Old Siamsa. From my perspective, I pretty much had the freedom. I mean, when it came to, when we were tracking, of course, Paul plays a lick, and it's my job as lead guitarist to, beef it up, to double it, whatever. But when it came to the solos, when it came to the texture, there weren't many times when he said, "Do this." The one I most clearly remember was when we were recording Daytime, Nighttime Suffering. And there was one particular figure that he wanted me to play. And the same thing with Coming Up. That Coming Up was based on that kind of like a James Brown kind of riff. That was integral to the song. But when it came to, kind of just what was going on with it, I mean, I didn't always succeed. Like when we were doing the end of Getting Closer, I had spent the weekend just tackling that chord progression, to really, kind of be able to just launch into a solo. And what it ended up becoming was what was on the record, which was a composed riff that got built up. But then when we did Goodnight Tonight, and they said, Paul said, give us kind of a flamenco thing. And that was, I just played something that fell under my fingers. And I said something like that. And they said exactly like that. And we moved on. There was, and with Paul, because he's a very, very capable guitar player, that if it wasn't going the way that he wanted to, he could always play it himself. He could always just pick up the Epiphone, plug into the AC30, and Bob's your uncle. You got one of Paul's characteristic guitar parts. But I think our version of Wings really, the fact that Back to the Egg came out, was released as a Wings album, not a Paul McCartney and Wings album, I think was a recognition that it had its own character. And that album it doesn't have the same character as its predecessors, I think. And it's always gratifying for me when I see, like, Mojo had the top 10 post-Beatles McCartney albums, and Back to the Egg was number 10 on that list. And if you look at the sales figures, it sits about number 12 on the list of post-Beatles McCartney album sales. So,
I'd rank it higher than 10, personally. Have you
well,
heard
but 10 is, I'll take 10. Being in the top 10 works
have you
for
heard
me.
any word about whether the archival box for that is ever going to come out?
I will express cautious optimism. How about that?
Okay. And we'll take that.
Cautious optimism, yeah.
We'll take that.
And we're coming up. I mean, we're now, 3 years away from the 50th anniversary. So whether that means anything or not, I don't know. But yeah, I think that one thing that I found really interesting, and to turn the topic to the Man on the Run documentary, which is really, at the end of the day, isn't entirely a Wings documentary.
No.
It is a documentary about Paul McCartney as an artist, his relationship with Linda, his relationship with the band that formed this project. And I loved the fact that Morgan, as director, when it came toward the end of the movie, even though there was very little discussion about our incarnation of Wings, he used the music very effectively. I mean, there's Old Siamsa, Arrow Through Me, and We're Open Tonight were used instrumentally as underscore. And I watched the movie in a Dolby Atmos theater at the Motion Picture Academy, And I was hearing stuff that I hadn't really heard since we actually recorded it.
Hmm.
You know, because they had done Dolby Atmos remixes of those tunes. And I think that it's that particular period is a difficult one for Paul because he's viewing it through the Japanese bust. He's viewing it also through John Lennon's assassination. And the fact that because Wings was Paul and Linda's project and Linda was starting to get tired. You know, by the time I joined the band, James was a little under a year old. You know, so there's now 4 kids. They move out of London because they want to keep the kids in school. So the idea of a world tour is not as appealing as it was, you know, 2-3 years earlier. So it was a different period. Plus, Paul had signed with Columbia Records. So he had this new record deal with responsibilities that went along with that. And I think that the fact that Back to the Egg came out, when it came out, the US economy hit a recession right around that week. I mean, pretty much almost to the day. The Columbia really didn't have much of an idea as to how to promote McCartney compared with Capitol, who coincidentally had the knack and knew exactly how to promote power pop. You know, sending out press releases on school exercise book paper because they were appealing to the high school kids. And, you know, the fact that the Old Siam Sir and My Sharona had a similar riff, and My Sharona was getting all the radio attention because of the way that the Capitol knew how to gain that, you know, from the previous experience of, you know, really from Band on the Run onwards, where they finally figured out how to sell McCartney. I think that there were a lot of factors that came into play, and Paul, you know, also he didn't like the criticism of that album, but the fans loved it and still do, and especially fans of a particular age, because it was really, you know, that was a kind of a coming of age album for fans that were McCartney fans who discovered the Beatles through Back to the Egg, because they weren't around in the 1960s. You know, they were just coming they were pre-teens, you know, or just becoming teenagers at the point where Back to the Egg was released. So I think there were a lot of factors that came into play that Paul, and the same thing happened with Wingspan, that he tends to kind of shy away from that period, you know, and it would have been helpful to point out that, you know, that was a much more successful album than he would give it credit for. That the last 2 Wings hit singles with Good Night Tonight and Coming Up were both huge dance club hits. I mean, they were dance rock records. You know, much as Good Night Tonight was described as a disco record by Columbia, it really wasn't. And I knew that because I played on real disco records. You know, I played on a number of records for an artist named Cerrone, including his Supernature album, and that was #1 on the Billboard dance club charts in I think 78, and was in the top 100 on Billboard too. But that was a real disco record as opposed to Good Night Tonight, which was almost more like kind of Spanish rock. In fact, the live version of it, where I'm playing electric guitar and not doing the acoustic guitar stuff, really kind of tends towards Santana territory on it. But I think that also, you know, Rockestra, the only reference to Rockestra is they licensed my picture of Linda, where Linda's at the B3, and you can see John Bonham and Kenny Jones and Steve Holley and John Paul Jones in the background. And that won the first Grammy for rock instrumental, you know, but no reference to that. But there was no other Grammy between Band on the Run and the orchestra. But that didn't, that stuff just doesn't come onto his radar. But that's okay, because the fans love him.
Can I ask you some questions about that weird period in between Japan and the April 27th, 1981?
Uh-huh.
You you have a bunch of periods of rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
Then Steve and Denny went off on tour.
Yeah, because
You
Denny who was working on his own stuff.
right. Um, and it looks like he just was frustrated with not touring and said, "Okay, I don't know what's going to happen with Wings. I'm
Right.
getting a band together and I'm going to go."
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
Steve joined, and he also recorded a couple of things on Japanese Tears with Denny. You went to Nice with Paul and Linda to work
For the
on
Ringo.
Ringo's
Yeah.
album,
Yeah.
what became Stop and Smell the Roses.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the time it was Can't Fight Lightning.
Well, yeah, because Can't Fight Lightning was a jam
Right.
that we did where Ringo borrowed one of my guitars and cut his finger. And there's actually in the label inside the guitar, there are spots of dried blood. So if we ever need to clone Ringo, I have his DNA.
He did have blisters on his fingers. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you remember of those sessions?
Oh, those sessions, I mean, that was very cool. I mean, I'm sitting in the studio with Ringo and Paul. I'm recording with half the Beatles.
Mhm.
And we had Lloyd Green came in from Nashville
Right.
to play pedal steel on Sure to Fall,
Right.
which was very exciting because, I mean, he was just, an icon in that pedal steel, country world, and a lovely guy to go along with it. And Howie Casey was there, because there was sax stuff to do. And it was all very convivial. I mean, it was, we spent about 10 days there.
hmm
And I think very productive. We also recorded Love's Full Glory, the instrumental track that ended up on Linda's Wide Prairie album.
hmm
So I was very happy about the fact that Paul considered me to be a valuable enough resource to bring in on that project.
hmm
And I had been, during the course of that summer, I had been going to New York on and off because I was establishing some working relationships there. And I knew that I was going to be, at some point, I was going to move out there. I just was drawn to, and had been for some time, to actually working in America. And I knew, what had happened was we were lined up to start work on the Tug of War album, expecting to go to Montserrat. We had been rehearsing in a couple of different places that were kind of adjacent to Peasmarsh, where Paul and Linda had moved the family to. We had been rehearsing material from what became Tug of War and the Pipes of Peace, those songs, which mostly should have just been worked out in a recording studio.
Right.
But we're rehearsing them, as essentially as a rock band, doing songs that weren't really rock songs. The one that I really distinctly remember was Paul saying, I dreamt a Rolling Stones song, and he came in with No Values, which was perfect for, what we could have been doing. But then, when George Martin was assigned to produce the record, the discussion then became, well, this isn't a Wings album, so let's just bring in other musicians, including, Stanley Clarke, because Linda loves Stanley Clarke's bass playing. I mean, if you're going to challenge Paul McCartney with a bass player,
hmm
Stanley Clarke would be certainly one to do it with. And so we kind of got bumped from the Montserrat trip, but we still, in January of 81, we were in the studio working on the Cold Cuts
Right.
material. which included me putting some, I guess I put some slide guitar on a Love for You, which ended up some years later in a movie. But the interesting thing was the very first session I had done in May of 78 was on the song called Same Time Next Year,
Right.
which was this big ballad that Paul was submitting for a movie of the same name, which ironically Marvin Hamlish got the score, who I had previously worked with on the Spy Who Loved Me soundtrack. And so that song was just kind of hanging around, and it didn't fit with Back to the Egg because it was a big kind of, there was a big string orchestra on it. It was a big kind of romantic ballad. But that was the very last song that we worked on. They did a remix of it. And then right after that was when I took off for New York. I never moved back. I mean, that was my transition to the States at that point.
So during those rehearsals in October, November, at I don't know how to say the name of the place. Was it
Pugin's Hall, and there was some other place that we
something in Finchenden?
Yeah, and I've got boxes of cassettes from that.
Well, you should send them over.
I think it's all out there. It's all out there on bootlegs anyway.
Okay. One of the things that was in one of those rehearsal sessions that has gotten out on bootleg was a song of yours apparently called Your Lucky Day. Does that ring a bell?
It's something I wrote on a Saturday morning in about an hour. And it was kind of because, when Paul was writing songs like Average Person, and it was just, it struck me. I mean, that song, I didn't even think about it. It just really kind of flowed out of me. And it was me really starting to exercise my songwriting muscle. And it was not anything I ever did anything with. There is a recording of it, I think, that I did in New York at one point. But it just, it was, and it was just, hey, I wrote this kind of thing. Yeah.
But like what you just have said, you hinted at it, but I think you told us in interviews for the books, and I believe it may be in your book too, that you thought at the time that it was kind of odd that he was rehearsing you in all of these songs that normally he would do in the studio, because that's how he's always worked in the studio before, and then rehearsed you afterwards if he was going to go on tour.
Right, but I think that this was kind of working out the material. And I think it may very well have been that he just wanted to see if it worked with the Wings ensemble. Right. And Linda wasn't very involved in any of that, which probably should have been a clue, because she was always involved in the other Wings stuff. And it just was a little frustrating because, it's like, okay, well, this would work great if I was playing a nylon string guitar, close mic nylon string guitar or whatever, and it, just my studio musician sensibility, would have preferred to be, even if we weren't in a, it could have been in the Rude studio or something, like in the basement of Soho Square where we had recorded some stuff. It just was. Ultimately, it didn't feel like it was the most productive use of time. But, that was how Paul wanted to do it. And, and some of it was just, okay, what are the chord changes and writing out chord charts. I mean, there's a photograph I saw of me kind of looking at Paul's hands, looking over his shoulder with some manuscript paper in my hand, writing out whatever the chords were. But we were still, it was still being within the Wings orbit at that point. And it wasn't really until we got done with the cold cut session in January. And then the timing was right for me to make the move. I had, during the course of 1980, been doing a lot of other stuff. I was producing a few different artists that just trying to get my production chops kind of sharpened for that. I scored I did the music for a commercial, chicken stuffing, Paxo the Rooster Booster. You'll find it on YouTube. A very old friend of mine from when I was a teenager, Tony Kaye, who's a director. He did American History X and had done a slew of advertising commercials. He was the one who brought me in on that. But an interesting side note on that is that the sax player that I used on it, Ralph Ravenscroft, is the one who played on Baker Street.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, because he was a great sax player and I could book him. So, But I think that year for me was knowing that, Wings was an intermittent thing, but it was still functional. I mean, we were still getting together and, there were, like what happened with the Ringo album. I mean, there were still opportunities there, but I was getting my production chops together. I was writing. It was right around the time that the Tascam Porter studio came out. So I had my little 4-track set up in my house. And I was just, and also because I had the first fingerstyle piece that I wrote, Maisie, was an outtake from Back to the Egg. I mean, I had Paul McCartney playing bass on my first real fingerstyle piece. And I was starting to do more of that. In fact, there was a tune that I later recorded under the title of Fire Leaves that I played for Ringo when we were in France. And there's a picture of Ringo, me sitting on the step playing, and Ringo kind of being my audience on that, which I thought was a very cool moment. But there were just things going on creatively that I needed to be in New York. And then, so I moved end of January of 81, and April 28th, I was at Catch a Rising Star, which I used to hang out at because Rick Newman, who owned the club, was managing a project that I was working on with Richard T. Bear. And I was there every night. And that was when I met Hope. And the entire universe shifted on its axis. And by October of that year, we were engaged and I had moved out to LA. And by the time we got married the following March, I was already starting to get studio work and getting involved in records and in television and in movies. So,
was there, during this period, was there any contact, even cordial, with Paul?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
But
it was clear that he had moved on, you'd moved on.
Oh yeah, I mean, but I remember having phone conversations with him when I was in New York. And, so the contact was there. And then, in the course of time, it became much more intermittent.
Yeah.
But still, I I ran into him when he was rehearsing in Burbank at Center Staging. There's a campus there there's a building that has a bunch of equipment companies. So I was there getting my Paul Reed Smith guitar tweaked, and I walk out and I see Brian Ray coming in his Tesla, in his Lucid, and then Rusty coming in his Tesla, and then Paul driving in his with his Corvette, and so hanging out with the guys and getting caught up. I mean, it's just, I think Denny Sywell, because he's the same age as Paul, and they had a very different history. Denny, I think, more than anybody else, has maintained the closest relationship with Paul, but it's always very cordial. And MPL have been very communicative over the years, too. So it's still, it's impossible to escape the Wings orbit. Having worked with Ringo and George, it's just, kind of, I refer to it as being Beatles adjacent. And then, then also producing Billy J. Kramer, for example. I mean, it's like, it's the whole kind of just that period, I think.
Right.
Yeah. And then
you
last
just
week, a
talk?
couple of weeks ago, I played with Mickey Dolenz at Abbey Road on the River because I played on That Was Then, This Is Now, which was the last Monkees top 20 single.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
My
So
gosh.
when I was in high school and all the girls were switching their allegiance from the Beatles to the Monkees, and then all the guys were realizing that the Beatles were actually like doing really hip stuff when Revolver came out, that I never imagined that I would be playing with 3 out of 4
Right.
Beatles and also, you know, half the Monkees too.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Can you comment a bit about in the book on Wings and
Hmm.
also in Men on the Run?
Hmm.
They bring up the fact that for the 79 tour, Paul was unhappy because he felt that the band was unrehearsed or not rehearsed enough.
I don't understand that
Yeah.
because, you know, you listen to the Glasgow, the Last Flight recording,
Hmm.
and that's, you know, that's a pretty tight band. And, you know, Coming Up was out of that concert. I think that if anything, perhaps it plays into the notion that and Paul kind of talks about it in the documentary, that the kind of the peak of his what he imagined Wings to be was the Wings Over America, Wings Over the World period,
Hmm.
and that where we were was at a different stage of the process, you know, and we were doing different repertoire. I mean, we didn't do Live and Let Die. We were going to do that in Japan.
Hmm.
We didn't do Let 'Em In. We didn't do Listen to What the Man Said. We didn't do Silly Love Songs. It was more of a rock and roll band from the perspective that, you know, and Paul, you know, Paul's doing 20 Flight Rock. He's doing Hot as Sun, you know, on the Epiphone.
Right.
We opened We've Got to Get You Into My Life because Earth, Wind and Fire had a hit with it, and Paul said, "Oh, I better do that song." It was a good opener too. I don't think that we were that. I don't think we were under rehearsed. I think that we had some issues with the sound in the course of doing it, but though by, you know, the time we got to Glasgow, you know, by the middle of the tour, that had been resolved, and going to Japan, you know, I mean, we had worked in Another Day. We were doing that because that had been a big hit in Japan. We were going to do Let 'Em In. We were doing Live and Let Die. I just don't know that Wings as it developed it wasn't the same band as the previous incarnation of the band. But Paul, I think that when he was playing that Yamaha bass on that tour, is some of the most robust bass playing that he ever did. I mean, he was really, you know, there's times when between me, Steve, and Paul, that it's like a power trio.
Huh.
And,
Yeah.
you know, I think, I mean, again, I think he has filtered that period through other factors. And, you know, what it comes down to really is, did the fans love it? You know?
Yeah, I think, there in a lot of Beatles related chats online that you run into when the film came out, a lot of people had the same reaction as you, just go listen to the Glasgow recording because you can't say that is badly rehearsed. But my theory about this
Mhm.
is that, he seems to have really disliked the Kampuchea concert experience. And I think all of you and Steve too, felt it was like it was a day where you were stuck in the building the whole day and it was,
Yeah.
too much
Um,
going on. And he seems to now look at the 1979 tour through the lens of
of
apart from
Kampuchea.
everything.
Yeah, I think that there were a few factors at work with Kampuchea. One was it was a very long day.
Hmm.
We went on very late. I mean, Elvis Costello and Rockpile, you know, had already done full sets. It was getting later and later. We did a truncated set. We didn't do the full set from the 79 tour. But we'd also been off over Christmas. So a lot of the drive, the momentum that had developed during the course of the tour had kind of, not all of it, but some of it had dissipated. I thought it was curious in the movie where he talks about not being able to hear his bass properly, because I don't understand that, because I could hear him just fine, and we were on the same stage together. But I think that it was kind of hard work. But by the time we got to the set with the Rockestra ensemble, you know, I mean, his Let It Be from that show was pretty awesome, I thought. You know, Rockestra with everybody playing was cool. And then Lucille. I mean, that was a single. Lucille was getting it radio airplay.
Yeah.
You know, ironically, when the Campuchia album came out, the only people that were at the reception at the United Nations were myself and Dave Edmonds and Arma Ertegun, because it was on Atlantic Records. Kind of ironic that you have Wings doing the first album for Columbia, and then the next release is on Atlantic. But that was the way the deal was set up for the whole Campuchia thing. So, you know, I mean, I can only speak from my own experience in that time frame. And I think that, you know, at the end of the day, I think that Wings was winding down during that period. And Back to the Egg, I refer to it in my book as the Indian summer of Wings, because it was an album that had its own integrity. Chris Thomas was a very important factor in that album. Because I think it's one of the things that kind of drew it away from a more typical Wings album. It wasn't entirely what Chris wanted, because he didn't get to use his own engineer. You know, Paul wanted to use Phil McDonald on it. So, you know, the engineering team was basically the Abbey Road Studios crew, you know, with Eddie Klein. You know, Phil had been one of the Abbey Road engineers. So he was in his comfort zone there. But I think Chris did make a difference. He was very involved in fine-tuning the guitar sounds and in really establishing the kind of the musical direction of things, because he had just done the Sex Pistols, and he was prepping the Pretenders, you know, for their first album. One thing to address is that I've seen commentary that Weep for Love is considered to be a Back to the Egg outtake, which is not the case. You know, Denny's song, Weep for Love. That was recorded while we were doing the videos, when we were at the castle doing the videos for Back to the Egg. But that was a standalone thing, as was Robber's Ball, which was a weird thing. That started life where I showed up, Paul arrived, sat down at the drums, and we jammed for a while. And then Paul said, "Oh, let's do something with that." And then we took the jam and then built a song around it. So if that ever gets released, I want songwriting credit.
Pretty weird song.
Oh yeah, it's completely weird. But you know, I mean, it was a weird day. Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how, you know, Back to the Egg was originally, it was supposed to, as I understand, it's supposed to be a concept album. And in some ways, I think some of the marketing around it was kind of confusing, because some of the marketing tried to establish it as that. But even Linda, I believe, said later on it started that way, and then, you know, it really
I don't know that I don't know that it started with a clear concept, other than kind of the idea of getting back to basics, which was why it was called Back to the Egg. Although it didn't start off being called Back to the Egg, it didn't have a title to begin with. But I don't know that there was really that there was an actual concept behind it. But then, you know, you look at Chris Thomas and his history as a producer, and, you know, even things that weren't necessarily concept albums kind of had a conceptual angle to them. And I think that it just it drifted into its own space, as albums have a tendency to do. Where you start isn't necessarily where you end up. So, I mean, the first tracks that we recorded, the very first one was To You, which was hardly, a conventional song. Spin It On, Old Siamsa. I mean, those were the first 3 tracks that we recorded. So, we started off with this kind of very much back to basics kind of rock attitude. And in that first group of songs in Scotland, I mean, Again and Again and Again was in there. Love Awake, Winter Rose was in there. We didn't really get to doing Getting Closer until we got to The Castle. But that initial burst of like with I mean, Spin It On being this kind of punk rockabilly thing.
Yeah.
But you can't really define a concept in any of that. And the fact is, I mean, Paul's always like with the end of Band on the Run, where the song where the Band on the Run comes back in at the very end.
Yeah.
And the way in which We're Open Tonight kind of got used again, at the end of So Glad to See You Here. And it's interesting because we're going from Abbey Road Studio 2 with this massive rock orchestra, and then the re-record of the more up-tempo version of We're Open Tonight, which we recorded in the basement of MPL in Soho Square, where the drums are set up in a kitchenette. So, all the ambience just kind of gets sucked down to nothing at that point. But I mean, that's about as conceptual as things got, other than, Getting Closer being the idea of getting on the road, like it was in the video. And then We're Open Tonight being the idea that the band is, kind of getting set up to play the gig. But it wasn't anything that really got kind of fully articulated.
Laurence, can you talk about the process of recording Back to the Egg? Because you did it in a number of different places. And Paul always seemed to pick unique environments to record in, from Africa, Band on the Run, and the yacht in the Virgin Islands and London Town. And Back to the Egg didn't have one location. It was 3, 4, or 5 different studios, makeshift studios. Talk about the process from what venue, what studio did you work in, and why was Paul moving around so much?
Well, we started in Scotland. June of '78, we spent 3 weeks in Scotland, basically rehearsing and jamming and figuring stuff out, which, going back to our earlier discussion about the tug of war stuff, the tug of war material was so very different from where we were approaching the material in Scotland, where being in a rehearsal environment and jamming was very much apropos of the direction of the songs. We spent three weeks there. At the end of it, we did the video for I've Had Enough from London Town, because that was going to be the next single. Then we went to New York for a week or so and took care of some business there, then came back and spent the month of July in Scotland with the Rack Records Mobile, because Mickey Most Studio, R-A-K, Rack, was where we had done same time next year. It was one of the North London studios. But we had the mobile studio there. We were set up in the barn. It was but it was summer holidays. The kids weren't in school, and they were used to spending the summer up in Scotland. So we're up there. We're recording in that environment. Then we took off in August. We had the month off. Then we went to Lim Castle, which is on the south coast. And now this is a relatively short drive from Peasmarsh, which is where Paul and Linda were now living. They'd moved out of London. The kids were in local schools there. And so they didn't have to drive very far. It wasn't like having to drive to Abbey Road at that point. That came later. But for the month of September, we were recording in this medieval castle, which was a challenge. It took a while to tame the great hall, to get a solid drum sound, but we did that. There was a wonderful spiral staircase where I sat and did the 12-string guitar on We're Open Tonight. And at the top of the staircase was a room that became the control room. That environment was kind of a very different space to be working. So we had this kind of bucolic, Scottish farm, and then we're in this kind of mysterious medieval castle with battlements and ghosts and weird kind of English history. And of course, it wasn't that far out of the norm of making rock and roll records in England that you would record in a medieval castle, and then from there we then went to Abbey Road, and that was where we did Rockestra, and we spent the next October, November, we spent a great deal of time in Abbey Road, kind of getting things ready so that by the time in January, after the Christmas holidays, we were ready to mix. We thought we were ready to mix anyway. But we couldn't get into Abbey Road. And because I think Cliff Richard had it, Kate Bush had it, we couldn't get in there. So Paul built the replica of the control room of Studio 2 in the basement at MPL in Soho Square. So we're right in the center of London, like West End. And that was where we were intending to mix, but the very first thing we did there was to record Daytime, Nighttime Suffering, which was a potential single, because we needed a single. Paul didn't want to take a track off the album to release as a single. So the first week there, we basically worked on that, and then we worked on Good Night Tonight, and mixed both of those, then got into mixing and finishing up some overdubs on the Back to the Egg material. And then eventually we went back to Abbey Road and recorded the brass, the Black Dyke Mills band on Love Awake,
Right.
and finished mixing there. So it was Scotland, it was Limcastle, it was Abbey Road, and it was Soho Square. So there were four different locations.
And yet the album itself it's a cohesive album. It doesn't
Well, it's EMI consoles, great microphones. The echo chambers, we were using the echo chambers and reverb from Abbey Road. Even when we were in Soho Square, they were coming in over high resolution phone lines. And you don't have to make a record in one place to have it sound consistent. It just has to sound consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And
were you staying in the castle when
no, we didn't stay in the castle. We stayed at a local motel or something, I forget.
So there weren't any sightings of ghosts from centuries past?
I didn't see one.
Okay.
But you could feel an unearthly presence,
Can you tell us, I know that there's a bootleg that all of us have heard of, Getting Closer, where Denny Lane is singing lead.
Okay.
Was that just a guide vocal, or was there any?
I have no idea. It could have been when we were rehearsing, and Denny just, for whatever reason, was sang the lead. I don't think there's anything to read from that. I don't think there was anything out of the ordinary. You
Okay.
know, sometimes we would just be jamming and launch into a song. I think there's even like bootlegs of me singing Johnny Be Good out there.
Since you mentioned that you produced Billy J. Kramer, why not move on and talk about your involvement with the new Peter Asher documentary?
Oh yeah, well that was an interesting one because I um, they had decided that they wanted to use for a scene in there. They wanted to use my solo recording of "And I Love Her" because the storyline was getting into the Paul Jane Asher relationship,
Hmm.
and Jeff Allen Ross had been working with the directors of the documentary, and they were going through this scene, and they were talking about editing it, and Jeff said, well, why don't we call Laurence? So he called me and said, hey, we're working on this, and I said, well, I'll do the edit for you. And then he said, well, we want you to come and work on the score. So I said, all right, why not? So Jeff and I, did a lot of the work together. Then there was a bunch of stuff that I did on my own here. And then Peter came over and we were going through all the material. And then we went into the studio with Lee Sklar on bass and my regular drummer, Christopher Alice, on drums, and a string quartet. And Jeff played some piano, and we recorded it. The most complicated thing was on the end credits. There's a whole sequence where there is a comparison between Peter and Austin Powers. The fact that the Austin Powers look came from Peter, and so they had footage of Austin Powers doing some of his crazy moves and stuff, and I needed to catch those accents. So I started off where I caught the accents, and then I built the cue around it, which meant that it had some very weird time signatures in it, and I managed to stump Lee Sklar. It's not an easy thing to do.
Oh,
Yeah. But he did great with it, and that's kind of a fun thing at the end of the movie. But there were different tasks to do because there were things where there were Peter and Gordon songs where Jeff had stripped off the vocals because there was narrative going on, so the music's happening, and then I would put the melody on with a nylon string guitar. Things like that. There was some stuff. There was a long time. I did an arrangement for acoustic guitar and string quartet of that. For the Linda Ronstadt segment. And there was a recording of the Stone Ponies from Greenwich Village doing different drum. That was really not a very well balanced recording, and so I added acoustic guitar to it just to kind of glue it together. So there were things like that where there was just some technical kind of stuff to deal with, and then there was a long sequence about Apple Records that Jeff and I wrote together where we really kind of, it was almost like a kind of a mini kind of rock symphony in the way that we had to build it, and there was some really kind of fun moments in that process. But it's nice. I always enjoy being able to do a scoring gig like that because it's, especially if it's not just guitar, it lets me stretch, kind of exercise some of my other muscles, my composer, arranger, producer, all of that stuff.
Before we started, you had mentioned your most recent solo album, so maybe you should mention that again.
Well, the new album is called "I've Got a Feeling." Mm-hmm. The subtitle, and to predicate that, the first album was LJ Plays the Beatles. The second album was LJ Plays the Beatles Volume 2. The third album was LJ is Still Playing the Beatles. Well, what, no, LJ can't stop playing the Beatles. Then the fourth one was the Fab Fourth. The one that I don't really count because it was all re-records was A Day in My Life. And then the latest one is I've Got a Feeling with the subtitle LJ's Still Playing the Beatles. So, and, you know, I still haven't even, I mean, I barely scratched the surface of their repertoire. You know, there's 180 original Beatles songs thereabouts, and I think I've recorded maybe 40 or 50 of them.
One of the tracks I love from the album is your cover of Not a Second Time, which, you know, that's not a Beatles track you see covered as often.
Well,
So
that's I'm glad you like that, because that's the fun thing is doing tunes that you wouldn't necessarily think to do. But, you know, when there's some musical element of musical substance that just makes it kind of compelling to do. I mean, on the new album, I did Lovely Rita, you know, because it's there. It's got this really cool counterpoint to it, you know, the way the bass line moves. And I couldn't resist it, you know. And then, you know, in the past, I mean, I Am the Walrus, Strawberry Fields Forever, stuff like that, that just, it's a guitaristic challenge, you know. So, but my ultimate arbiter with this stuff is hope, because I have to be able to approach the song in a way that is at the same time honoring the material, but also creating that nexus of a solo guitar and the material that is musically and guitaristically satisfying. And that's a lovely challenge to have, because you know, it's the Beatles. So but I do think, I mean, in the past I've been pretty kind of structured with the arranging process, but on this album there's a little bit more of a looseness about it. You know, especially playing a guitar that wouldn't typically be a jazz guitar. Just bringing in some more improv elements like that.
But I just love what you did with Not a Second Time, because as you just mentioned, you obviously, you know, greatly honored the original, but some of the juicy jazz chords all that you brought into it, I love it.
Well, you know, and part of that is because I use alter tunings, that it gives me a chance to think a little in guitar voicing's a little more the way a piano player would voice, or voicing for a horn section, where I can throw in a chord that has the second in it. So there's like clusters in there, but without having to do the Andy Summers kind of big stretch, where, you know, because I've jammed with Andy and every chord he plays has an added second in there somewhere. But there's also, I mean, the opportunity to do a song like Yes It Is, which John kind of dismissed as a retread of This Boy, but really has its own character. And that was actually one of the first ones I did for this album, because it was just a very compelling piece of music, and doing it on guitar, and I'd use C, G, D, G, A, D tuning for that, because it's in the key of C, so it's, you know, it's got the deep bass notes in there too. It's stuff like that that just is very motivating, because it just gives me such a clear focus for my musicianship and my guitaristic capabilities, and audiences seem to like that stuff. So,
you think you'll eventually have recorded every Beatles song at some point?
No,
I don't think I have enough time to record every Beatles song. But also, I mean, I still, you know, and this goes back to the decision when I did the first album, LJ Plays the Beatles, that I was doing it not exactly under sufferance, but I was doing it and taking away from my motivation as a composer, because my first batch of stuff, the stuff I'd recorded, was nearly all original compositions. I mean, I did a Christmas album, so there's some kind of public domain arranging that went into that. But as time went on, my kind of compositional motivation also kind of transferred itself into scoring, you know, for television or for picture and stuff, or video games. I mean, and theme parks. I did music for Disney Sea theme park in Tokyo. I did co-composed the score to Diablo 3, which was a very, very famous video game. I mean, it's, so for me, as long as I get the opportunity to make music in some capacity, whether it's as a guitarist, as an arranger, as a musical director, as a composer for theater or for television or for movies. I mean, Hope and I wrote Gilligan's Island the musical, which gets lots of kind of small theater productions. And we're right now kind of keeping our fingers crossed that our Brady Bunch musical is going to get a workshop before too long. So we'll see. I live at a very weird nexus of pop culture between the Beatles adjacent and Gilligan and Brady adjacent because of Hope's family business. It's a blessing, really.
Yeah.
Okay, can I just ask, just backtracking with the Peter Asher film, how heavy does it go into Paul and Jane's relationship and about the struggles at Apple?
It does a fair amount about Apple. It doesn't go that deeply into Paul and Jane's relationship because it's really the focus being on Paul living in the Asher house and the consequences that came from that as far as how that impacted Peter and Gordon. And Peter's relationship with Paul leading to the Apple gig. And so, but again, it's still from the perspective, it's not a documentary about Apple Records. It's a perspective of Peter Asher and bringing James Taylor into Apple. And then as Apple is dissolving, taking James to LA and then starting a whole new chapter at that point. But you do learn a lot about Peter and Gordon. You learn also a lot about Indica, the bookstore and how all of that coalesced and then dissolved. And there's some fascinating information in there. But there's some good stories.
Yeah, well, he's had an extraordinary life.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
If all he did was Peter and Gordon, that's enough for a lot of people. But his work as a producer is just so amazing, not just with James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt, but so many other people.
Diana Ross. Barbara Streisand. I mean, he produced the latest Barbara Streisand duet album.
Yes.
Right.
That's right. 10,000 Maniacs.
What's that?
Yeah.
10,000 Maniacs.
10,000 Maniacs. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's a long list.
Yeah.
A very long list, and that gets addressed in the documentary, but in a very truncated way, because really the focus is on the 60s and 70s aspect of things. But yeah.
Well, I've seen many of his shows, whenever he tours.
Right.
And, it covers pretty much what you were just talking about.
Were you at the one that we did, City Winery in New York, June
I
of
missed
last
that one.
year? Because I played on that run. Because they needed a guitar player for that run of gigs, and I had been doing the documentary, so I said, "I'll come and do it." So, once in a while, I'll just enjoy being a sideman, somebody else's show.
Yeah, but I've seen him play with Jeremy Clyde. They're going to tour again.
Yeah.
I saw him when he reunited with Gordon. So.
Quick Gordon story. We were doing, this many years ago, I was playing at an event at the Egyptian Theatre in Hollywood where they were doing a British film festival. And Martin Lewis was producing the event. And I was playing in like the house band. And Gordon was there, and Vic Flick was there. Now, if you don't know the name
Wow.
Vic Flick, Vic was the guitarist with the John Barry Seven who did the original James Bond theme.
Yeah.
Who's also, he played on World Without Love because he was a studio musician in London. And Martin comes up to me and he says, "Hey, do you think we can get Vic to play on World Without Love?" And so I sidled over to Vic and I said, Martin wants to know if you want to play the solo on World Without Love. And Vic said, I played it once 40 years ago. I have no idea what I played. But, that's the nature of being a studio musician. But, yeah, Gordon, I mean, I did a bunch of things with Gordon, just around, Beatle fests and things. But I never actually played with Peter and Gordon together. I wasn't involved in that period.
Yeah, they actually reunited for a Mike Smith benefit.
Right. Now, I had worked with Mike Smith when he had a duo with Mike Darbo. It was Smith and Darbo. And they did a TV special in 1977. And I played in the band. Ray Russell was the other guitar player in that. But yeah. But it was funny for me because I had seen Mike Smith where I grew up in Southgate in North London. Dave Clark's mum lived at the top of my street. And once in a while, I would see Mike Smith coming in or out of the Dave Clark house. So it was kind of, when you're a teenager, I mean, it's like, wow, Dave Clark 5 guy.
Yeah.
And they were a local band because the Dave Clark was from Tottenham, which is where my soccer team were based, Tottenham Hotspur. That was my team when I was actually following soccer, which I no longer do. Although it's hard to avoid with the World Cup going on right now.
I was just going to say, you're not following any of the World Cup games going on right now?
No, not yet. When we get closer to the finals, but those Knicks, we could not avoid getting excited about that, And I'm not even a fan of basketball. I've been to like one basketball game. We took the kids to see the Clippers once, and it was like, okay, I get it.
I am the one Brooklyn Nets fan
Okay.
in existence, so I'm not really paying very close attention to the Knicks winning.
All right.
But yes, the World Cup fever. We have relatives from England who are coming here, who had made plans to see England play Panama at what is it? New York, New Jersey Stadium, also known as MetLife Stadium. And then we realized that you have to sell off several members of your family and mortgage your house to get tickets.
Right.
So it's now been reduced to they're coming all the way here to go to a big viewing party in Queens. But so we're sort of caught up a little bit here in World Cup fever.
Yeah.
Not
but
fever.
but the thing is that events like that have become so pricing people out so much. And same thing with concerts.
Yeah.
It's not an easy process. But talking of concerts, I mean, we went to see Paul at the Fonda Theatre when he was there a couple of months ago. And I've always enjoyed seeing him, I mean, beyond having actually been on stage with him, I mean, to go see him in a small local venue. It's like we were there when he was at Amoeba. Amoeba Records.
Oh, cool, yeah.
Back in the day. And then we saw him at a Peter benefit at the Hollywood Palladium where there were like 400 people there, and you could literally walk up to the stage. And that was one of those rare occasions where we were backstage hanging with him and Nancy, and there's like nobody else there. It's just us. To get that kind of one-on-one or two-on-two thing is not a common occurrence.
Any thoughts, Laurence, on The Boys of Dungeon Lane?
Well, I love the fact that it's a very guitar-forward album. I have seen some criticism of the compression in the sound, but I actually kind of like the way that record sounds. My favorite track is Life is Hard, because I think it's a very clever
Yes.
thing. There are moments where, to be honest, Paul kind of falls into old melodic patterns, and those I kind of get lost with stuff like that. But overall, I think it's a very good listen. I think he's in good voice, and I think that he clearly embraced the material, and the fact that it has kind of this retrospective kind of going back through his past is very apropos of a geezer who turns 84 in a matter of hours now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it deserves the accolades, and it deserves the chart position that it's accomplished. I think it definitely is one of his better releases.
All right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okie
Do you ever
dokie.
listen to any of Paul's records after you were in Wings and say, I wish I could have had a go at that one, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's listening to any of that stuff. It's like, oh, maybe I would have done that differently. But I had my moment.
Yes, you did.
I had my
Yes.
moment in the surrounded within Paul's aura, and from then on it's like one goes on with one's career and having a burnished resume and not being it's not anything that I can ever walk away from, because there's always something Wings happening. And just this year I was thinking, okay, well, kind of moving on, and then there's the documentary, there's the book,
Right.
there's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it it keeps going. So, but I think the thing that I'm really maybe just to finish up is how there are bottles of wine that you put down for 50 years and then they become drinkable, truly drinkable. And I think Back to the Egg is one of those albums that in the course of time has matured to the point where it's very drinkable. If you excuse me, mixing metaphors there, that I think that people are discovering it. And I know, I mean, my daughter Elsie, the songwriter, has found people that she works with who love that album. Harry Styles is a fan of that record.
Oh,
Wow. Musicians of a certain age have, just embraced it. And, the power pop element in that record, it's Paul kind of embracing what had become, I mean, you go back to, kind of like 1974, and you've got Brinsley Schwartz, with Nick Lowe, kind of, playing the pub circuit, and British power pop kind of evolving to Elvis Costello, and that, a song like Getting Closer really kind of has that power pop sensibility, and how that that's not anything that really ages, whereas there's music from that period that just has kind of aged out of people's consciousness.
Right.
yeah.
But somehow Back to the Egg just keeps kind of cropping up. So that's a nice thing to, to be able to look at that and say, yeah, it still has some relevance. And
Agreed.
yeah.
And if the box set would come out,
Yeah.
that's
As I say, I am cautiously optimistic.
and that'll do wonders in pushing that along even more,
Well,
the
yeah.
legacy of the album.
Yeah, but remember that, I mean, my experience these days is that people don't, people buy a CD so they can get an autograph. They don't have CD players in their cars. The collectors want the archivals because that gives them, the collectability factor. But I think, the fact is, for the general listener, Back to the Egg's already out there in the streaming universe. I mean, it would be nice to get a remastered version at this point.
Yeah.
Certainly would be lovely to have a Dolby Atmos version of it. and one would expect that such things would accompany an archival of that. Maybe they could even upsample the videos, which were very much came out of the analog, very early days of videotape editing. I mean, the Back to the Egg video, the 30-minute Coca-Cola sponsored special, predated MTV.
Right.
I think if that album had come out a year later, it probably would have had a different reception because MTV didn't exist in 1979.
Right.
I remember going to a concert in Central Park, I think it must have been 1980, and Hunter Ronson were being filmed for this thing called MTV that still hadn't launched at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But then it became an 800-pound gorilla and was sucking up, people's videos were sucking up more money than the albums were costing.
And now they don't do music anymore, really.
Now they don't do music anymore.
Well, some of these archival releases, like for Wildlife and Red Rose Speedway, I think because they came out as box sets, I think there's much more of an appreciation for the early McCartney years with Wings because of that. So,
yeah. And I think the same will happen at that point, that much anticipated point in the future, when such a thing as an archival Back to the Egg, and London Town too. I mean,
yes,
that's another one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think given everything that's been going on, that one would anticipate a sense of completeness would factor into making such things available. But beyond that, I have no other intelligence to offer.
Okay.
Okay.
Any chance you'll be doing dates on the East Coast?
I got nothing planned right now. Oh, I am. I tell a lie. I am in Harrisburg, PA, in April. I think it's April 24th of next year. And I yesterday sent an email to my agent with a big question mark. I said, okay, well, what else is going on? What other gigs am I going to do in that period? So, yes, there are, potential opportunities, but the reality is that I am not that motivated to be traveling, other than vacations. We went to Iceland.
Oh, nice.
Oh, that was
Nice.
fabulous. Yeah.
I bet. Yeah, that's on my bucket list.
Yeah. Well, because we really wanted to see the Northern Lights. I guess we could have gone to Detroit to see the Northern Lights, but
Yeah, same thing.
but travel is, it's a lot less fun than it used to be.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I've just been spending, since COVID, because a lot of the circuit that I used to work, that was basically the acoustic guitar circuit, some of that just kind of faded away. Venues closed, promoters are no longer promoting, but there are still things that come up, So I'm setting up some stuff in Arizona in October, but I don't think I'll be on the East Coast much before April of next year, unless, of course, the Beatle Fest should happen to actually, happen.
Right.
But maybe they'll, in the space of having taken the time off, they'll reconfigure their concept.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I like doing, like, Abbey Road on the River is a nice one. I've done that a few times, and that's because that's entirely about the music. And and I always get to sit in with some of the other musicians, like with Mickey Dolenz, for example, just to kind of strut my stuff in a way that I'm not just wielding an acoustic guitar, but
Right.
but the just and there is a strong fan base out there. But having spent the best part of 30 years really working into the kind of what functionally is kind of the folk acoustic world. And then kind of counterbalancing that with the rock and roll side of things. And, it's, I think there are opportunities out there. This Saturday, I'm doing a thing at Music Head Gallery in Hollywood, which is a photographic gallery where they have amazing rock and roll pictures, Henry Diltz and, all the great photographers. I'm doing a combination, I'm calling it tunes, tales, and photographs. And I'm going to play, I'm going to talk a bit. I have a PowerPoint with some of my Wings photos, and we're offering a couple of prints. So it's kind of a combination concert photo gallery thing. Yeah.
I want to, Laurence, I want to make just a very quick side before we wrap up, unrelated to anything that we've talked about really today. In my fairly new radio program called Noises from the Valley, which is on WKZE. A few weeks ago, I did a bunch of 50th anniversaries, 2-song sets from albums turning 40 or 50 years old. And I never knew that you played on the very first Alan Parsons Project album.
Neither did I. Until I read it in a magazine 25 years later, because I never got it. It was a secret session, that Tales of Mystery and Imagination, and Terry Sylvester sang on it. He had no idea what he was singing on. It was all secret, but it was my first session in Studio 2 at Abbey Road.
Oh, really? Wow.
String orchestra. Francis Monkman from Curved Air was playing harpsichord. There were a couple of mandolin players, and it was an instrumental thing. And I, went off. That was just a Tuesday night. I mean, that was my third session of the day. So, and then I forgot all about it. And then my name was on the credits when the LP came out, but when the CD was released, it was. And I'm reading this interview with Alan Parsons, and he says, "Oh, Laurence Juber came and played guitar." I did. So yeah.
I was putting.
How that happens.
I was just kind of skimming the names of the people who, some of them went on to become regulars with the Alan Parsons Project, guys from Pilot and Ambrosia, and Terry Sylvester. I'm like, and of course Arthur Brown makes an appearance on at least one of the songs on the album. And I see Laurence Juber there, and I'm like, hold on a minute, I never knew that.
Well, I did a lot of studio work prior to Wings, so things show up that it's like, oh yeah, I played on that.
Should I find out some other things that you did? I'll let you know.
Yeah, please do.
Research some other,
Yeah.
Did you keep a diary of your work?
I did up to a point, but I think my 76 and 77 diaries seem to have disappeared. But I do have, I have a pretty good idea of what it is I played on, and stuff that, but I for example, in 77, I went to Paris and did record with Charles Aznavour. And then I discovered from my own Wikipedia page that album was #1 in France for almost the entire year of 1978.
Wow.
So while I was joining Wings, I was also featured on a #1 album in France, and the Cerrone Supernature record, which was a #1 dance club hit in America. And who knows what else? Just stuff,
That's great.
Yeah.
Now
I'm going to go walk the dogs. They're going to get very mad.
Thank you for spending
lovely to
time
chat
with
with
us.
you. I'm sorry that the errant Steve Holly did.
Well,
that.
those drummers.
Yeah.
Well, but
He
Steve's
emailed me.
Steve's a busy lad, and
Mhm.
but maybe you'll get a chance to interview him separately. So you'll get more bang for your buck there.
This was great.
While we were doing this, he emailed me,
Oh.
and he said he had trouble with the Zoom link, and he thinks that where he was at, the Wi-Fi wasn't working.
There you go.
Okay.
All I can
Gotcha.
say is when I was in college, when I was at London University, it took 1.5 years to get a phone installed where I lived.
Oh,
Okay. Now we worry. Now we complain about Wi-Fi.
Right, exactly. Right.
that's right.
On that note,
Yeah.
lovely to chat with you all.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
again.
Great to see you again, Laurence.
Great
Thank
to
you so
see you.
much.
You're very welcome, and just do stay in touch. And
We will.
I'll certainly let you know if I'm going to be doing anything on the East Coast. So
Please do.
Right.
you may hear from Michael Jensen. Michael Jensen, who is still my publicist, was the publicist at Columbia Records who handled the Back to the Egg release.
Wow.
Yeah.
Small world.
So yeah, it is a
Cheers.
small one. Cheers.
Okay.
Take care,
Thank you so
Laurence.
much.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Oh man, I
Another
wish I'd
one
known he
more.
was on Supernatural when I was teaching my disco class. Damn it.
He's like Forrest Gump, he seems
He's
to be
everywhere.
Yeah.
Jeez, like Forrest Gump.
Maybe they should have made a documentary on him and call it Everywhere Man.
That's right.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Well, that was tremendous. It's kind of what I expected when Laurence Juber is around because he's got so many stories to tell and a great memory to back it up
Yeah.
of so much of the work that he's done, not just with Paul McCartney, but a lot of people in the industry. And sorry that Steve Holly couldn't make it. We'll try to have him on
Sure.
in the near future.
Really.
Could always stand some more Wings talk. Okay, so why don't we go around the horn here? I think I hear a horn. And tell the folks what we're all up to. Darren, we'll start with you.
Well, of course, again, Noises from the Valley, my radio program on WKZE, which is in the Hudson Valley region of New York State, Dutchess County. WKZE is located at 98.1 FM and 105.9. These quirky FM things about the signal once you get up into the Catskills and the Catskill Mountains and the Hudson Valley. For some reason up there, 98.1 doesn't do what 105.9 does. So, but I'm sure many of the people watching this will need to go to your computer and you could stream WKZE at WKZE.com or just get their app and you can listen on their app. And the cool thing is that Noises from the Valley and some of the other programs on WKZE are archived for a period of time, which you could listen to, at your leisure in the audio archives. Again, at WKZE.com. Now, this coming Friday night show, we recorded this show on the 15th of June, which is a Tuesday. So this coming Friday night, I'm going to be acknowledging, of course, Paul McCartney's birthday. I'm going to play some sets of Paul, some sets with, some sets of the Beatles. And I think what I'll do is combine it with some Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys as well, because, of course, Brian's birthday is coming up. And that'll sort of be the theme for this coming Friday night show, which will air on what are we at now? The 19th. Friday the 19th, Noises from the Valley, 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Friday nights on WKZE. You can also look for me on Facebook. There are 2 Facebook pages. You can send me a friend request. You can like the other or do both. That's what I prefer, and we'll be in touch.
Okie dokie. Queen.
Well, well,
Just
thank you.
Queen.
Just Queen. That's all. That's
Queen.
all. Just the one stage. That's all you need to know. So, just a couple of things coming up. As always, we're releasing new episodes of Toppermost the Poppermost, and you can find all of that at toppermostthepoppermost.net. We'll be recording more episodes very soon. So just go to, and you can also join our Facebook group and you'll be notified whenever new episodes come up. Like and subscribe, rate, all that good stuff. Also, Ken Womack and I are going to do another episode in our series on Classic for a Reason, where we look at take in-depth looks at classic albums, and this time we are going to be looking at Buddy Holly. We have a really fun presentation that is in the works right now, and so I hope you will join us. That's Tuesday, June 23rd at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. I have the links to register on my Facebook pages, the Talk More Talk one, they're all over. So please register. We hope to see you there and be on the lookout. I'm going to be announcing my fall courses very soon.
Oh, okay.
So and I think you guys will really like them. But going to keep it a secret for now. And of course, you can find me kiddotool.com, and you can find me like Darren. I've got two pages. One that you can send me a friend request. Another, you hit like. And yeah, that's all I've been up to.
She's keeping it a secret from all
I
of
did,
us. She's not going to
Yeah.
I
tell
didn't
us.
know you had 2 pages. Let me go
Mm-hmm.
find your 2 pages.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here you go.
Yep. Told you.
Oh, I'm on it. Kiddo Tools keynotes.
That's it.
Yep, I'm
Yep.
following you there. We're all set. We're all caught up.
Ah, thank you, sir.
Alan?
Well, I have 3 pages if you count the
Oh,
McCartney
Oh,
Legacy
well.
Facebook page.
Well.
So
excuse me.
you can contact me on Facebook as Allan Kozinn or Allan Kozinn Remixed or the McCartney Legacy page, which we haven't really updated in a while. Adrian Sinclair and I both did an interview this week with someone in Mexico, in Monterrey, Mexico, named David Ochoa. And I don't know the name of his podcast, but it's going to come up fairly soon, and I'll mention it when I've got a date for it or something. But it was a fun interview, and our first interview in Mexico. As he put it, our first interview in a Spanish-speaking country, although we spoke English, and I think he'll subtitle it. So let's see. You can contact all of us here at Things We Said Today at thingswesaidtodayradioshow@gmail.com. And you can find us at formerly known as Twitter at Things We Said Fab, or on BlueSky at Things We Said Today at Things We Said Today. And there's our Facebook page, Things We Said Today video podcast. The new shows are always posted there as soon as they're finished being edited. Please remember to visit us on YouTube or on Podbeam or on Apple Podcasts or on iHeartRadio, wherever it is and wherever you are. Subscribe, click like, all that stuff. And basically, that's it for me.
We're pretty close to having 5,000 subscribers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So if you haven't subscribed, please do so.
Yeah.
We'll
Is
have a
that
big
just
party.
on YouTube or on Podbeam?
YouTube.
Yeah, because each of them has different numbers, so we need to add them all up at some point. But you know what? Subscribe on all of them.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost anything, just click subscribe, and there you are. Bob's your uncle, as Laurence said.
Okay. So as for myself, on my YouTube channel, I've been a little busy lately. The channel's called Ken Michaels Radio. I did something right after our last Things We Said Today show because there was so much news I couldn't get to all of it in our show. So I put the remainder of it on my channel. And there's a ton of stuff that we haven't even discussed here on this show. So even though it's a couple weeks old, there's bound to be a lot of things that happen that you may not even know about. It goes under the title Whole Lot of News, Whole Lot of Beatle News. Okay. Also, I did a show reviewing Record Collector's recent All George Harrison issue with Daryl Easley, who is the editor for the very specialized Beatle issues. There was first one on McCartney, then was one on John and Yoko, and last December they did one on George Harrison. So Daryl's on the show, and Owen Lynn, who you know from the book George Harrison in the 70s, he wrote an article in there too. So we talk about the issue. Really a wonderful issue. Covers everything. The singles, the albums, Dark Horse Records, Handmade Films, Danny's music even. So if you can, check out that issue because all their back issues you can order. It's not like you can only get it when it first comes out. All their back issues you can order online. And they've done a wonderful job with the McCartney, the Lennon, and the Harrison now. So in addition to that, I did another Beatles preferences show That was with Joe Mayo, who we know from Talk More Talk and his own Mean Mr. Mayo channel. Ed Rising, who has his own podcast, Ed's Pop-O-Matic podcast. And Sam Wiles, who has an all Paul McCartney podcast, Paul or Nothing. And Beatles Preferences is a fun idea where I mention 2 or 3 songs or albums, Beatles or solo, and my guests have to pick which ones they prefer to listen to. Not necessarily which is the best of the bunch, though it could be, doesn't have to be. So yeah, those are 3 new shows in the last couple of weeks that I put on my channel. Speaking of Ed Rising, on his own podcast, I was on there, Kit was on there, Fred Velez, the big monkeys expert especially, was on there, Daniel Costin. We were all reviewing Boys of Dungeon Lane. So you can check that out on his own podcast. Again, that's called Ed's Pop-O-Matic Podcast.
That was a lot of
P's there.
fun. Yeah, that was great.
Definitely. So we actually did that right after we reviewed it.
That's right.
It was like 4 or 5 hours of
That was a
talking
long
about
night.
Also, my radio show on the Beatles, Every Little Thing, can be heard on some 50 radio stations, but the easiest way to hear it is on WFDU in Teaneck, New Jersey, on Saturday mornings at 6 a.m., Sunday mornings 8 a.m., that's Eastern Standard Time, 89.1 FM. But kind of like what Darren has with WKZE, they also have an archives page, and you can listen to the last 2 weeks of shows of Every Little Thing on WFDU.FM. Very easy just to go there. Also on my own website, kenmichaelsradio.com, there's Beatles trivia contests all the time. You can win books, CDs, DVDs, including Ringo Starr's most recent album, Long, Long Road. And I just want to remind everybody, since we just had Laurence on, kind of hoping that Steve Holly could make it, but unfortunately he had connection problems with us. There's a show that I did on my channel shortly after Denny Lane passed away on what would have been Denny's birthday. And Laurence was on the show, Steve Holly was on the show, Denny Sywell was on the show. It's one of the best shows I'm really proud of, and so happy that the 3 of them could do this for Denny. So go and check that out too if you can on Ken Michaels Radio. And like we all said, please subscribe to each of our channels. Ken Michaels Radio, Things We Said Today, Talk More Talk, Toppermost of the Poppermost. Yeah, and we appreciate all you guys for being here. So on behalf of Kid O'Toole, Allan Kozinn, Darren DeVivo, and with very special thanks to Laurence Juber, we missed you, Steve Holly. We'll get you soon. Thanks to all of you for watching, and we'll see you next time.